Live this morning. So welcome. It's a Monday morning. Happy to be doing Facebook Live today. And I just wanted to talk, we had the Super Bowl yesterday, and I wanted to talk a little bit about my feelings about football, my relationship with football, if you can call it that. It's not like it's any big relationship. I used to, in college and for a lot of years after that, I would enjoy the game. And I'd certainly, if I was invited to a Super Bowl party, we had one set of friends who had a regular Super Bowl party with them and their friends and their family. There was always a great grid for the Super Bowl poll. And that was, it wasn't really based on skill, it was based on luck. They'd lay out the grid with all the digits from, 0 to 9 across the top and across the bottom. And if you're, that would create two numbers of what the score would be. And if your score matched where the game was at the quarter and at the half and at the third quarter and then at the end of the game, you won a certain amount of money. And you could, for like $5, you could buy a square on the board. So, that made it a lot of fun. And just being with people and socializing made it a lot of fun. But over time, I came to understand the impact on the human brain and became much more concerned about traumatic brain injury and began to feel less and less comfortable that these players were exposing themselves to tremendous lifelong and often life-shortening injuries. And as I felt less and less comfortable with it, I became less interested in watching football. And one year I even hosted an alternative Super Bowl party where I had a neurologist and a radiologist and a nurse who had experience, something like 10 years or more, working with brain trauma victims. She then became the head of nursing in an educational program. And the three of them were able to talk very convincingly about the challenges that are presented when the brain experiences significant injury. And one of the takeaways from that was that, unfortunately, the brain is not entirely like other organs that has a lot of flexibility in its ability to move in the cranium. That even a minor injury can sometimes can cause dramatic injury. And more importantly, repeated injury, even if it was at a relatively low level, can start to create damage. And so when we have, as the NFL has responded to traumatic brain injury and attempted to create protocols about when players went back into the game after concussion, how long they had to wait between games after an identified brain trauma like a concussion. They were working to abate the problem, to really address it, and yet, at the end of the day, it was like ultimately like trying to uncrack an egg. That at a certain point, there was going to be a certain number of brain injuries, and it was a fairly low level that was going to start causing the kind of trauma that we start seeing in players 10, 15 years after their playing careers are over, maybe longer, where they start to see this incredibly slow and then faster and faster, but very tragic and impactful decline of depression and irascibility, aggression, lack of focus, which often leads to a very traumatic end, both for the players themselves and for the people around them. So for me, I sort of joke about my one-man opposition, my one-man boycott, and clearly it's having a lot of effect, because the NFL is a more popular and more successful business in America than ever before. It's really grown tremendously, and it continues to grow. And at the same time, I don't want to, this is what a choice is I've made for me. If I'm sure many of you are football fans and you had a great time watching the game. Apparently it was a fantastic game yesterday. My son even texted me and he was like, "Dad, you missed a really good game." And I will say I used to really enjoy the playoffs in particular, because you really saw, that was when you saw some of the best football, when you really saw the best quality of athletic performance. And one of the things I've always loved about football, actually in baseball as well, is performance in the clutch moment. When you can fantasize about the dream that can happen, and then the dream happens. Like I was actually at the game this past season in baseball when Cody Bellinger came up. The Dodgers had got on the board early in the beginning of the game in one of the final playoff games, and then had a miserable game where they wasted tremendous opportunities. And then Cody Bellinger comes up with men on base, and I think to myself, boy, if he homers now, this place will go crazy, and he'll save this game. And that is exactly what he did. And so that execution, that moment when what you imagine happens can actually happen, is exhilarating. And football, particularly the playoffs, could always be a guarantee of that. Not all the time the Super Bowl, by the way. I think even diehard fans will admit there have been a lot of really kind of snore-fest Super Bowls where one team just dominated the other and there wasn't really a game. Obviously, my understanding is that yesterday's game was particularly dramatic, and that made it tremendously enjoyable. But it's for me, it's kind of like, what I want to bring it back to is my own self-leadership. It's my own vision of what I want to be. If I have a certain feeling, if I have an opinion, I want to stand for what I believe in. And that's what it is. It's about me being able to look in the mirror and saying, I'm doing what works for me. What happens in the larger world, if I end up becoming part of a movement that changes things, fantastic. But if not, I'm doing what works for me. And I think that I want to extend that and suggest where can you do that? What are the things that you want to stand for? And they don't have to be big political statements. They don't have to be about big world events. They really can start with our taking a stand in our own lives. And what do we want to stand for ourselves? What are the lines in the sand that we want to draw for ourselves? What are the terms that we want to hold for ourselves? That's what it's really about for me. And that's the thought that I want to leave you with. I don't want this to be interpreted as an anti-football screed. If you continue to enjoy it, then enjoy it. My hope is that over time we will develop more and better ways to protect players so that even the protocols that are in place are advanced. I'm optimistic and I always hope for growth, but I want to focus instead on you personally. What are the decisions you're making in your own life? Where are you drawing a line in the sand and being clear about what works for you, what you need in your life, what you want to do in your life, and how do you want to live your life? That's the question I want to leave you with today on this Monday. Thanks so much for watching. Check out my YouTube page, Mark Progress Coach, and my website, markcoach.net, and I'll see you next week.